to our first ever episode of A Couple of Silmarils. I'm Addie Bell,
And I'm Ethan Bell.
and we are starting this podcast to go through the book, The Silmarillion. We are excited to get into that a little bit more, but first we want to introduce ourselves. We've been married for 11 years, and we've been obsessed, both of us have been obsessed with Lord of the Rings since 12
Something like
12
that.
or
And probably,
13 years old.
early
So
on.
before we even met, we were reading them and watching them, going to the theaters to watch them. And then when we got married, we started watching them every Christmas because they are Christmas movies. You can not tell me otherwise. And so we are really into it. We've also done like different food and meals themed with Lord of the Rings. And then recently we read the books together, The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. So we felt like, the next book should be The Silmarillion. However, it's a hefty book, as we'll find out. We haven't read it yet. And so we thought a good way to break it down and to understand it better would make a podcast of it. So it would make us slow down, dive into a little bit more of the background and J.R.R. Tolkien and his son who helped put the book together. So, Ethan, could you tell us why we named our podcast A Couple of Silmarils?
Well, obviously we thought it was a bit of a good pun based on the Silmarillion, but also as we are learning from our brief discovery of of the Silmarillion, the Silmarils are gems, and so we are a couple, and so it's a play on the word of us being a couple and Silmarils.
Yeah, so we're a couple of gems.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to do a brief summary of the Silmarillion. I'm looking down at my phone because I could not memorize all the names actually of people. So this is a brief summary. The Silmarillion is a J.R.R. Tolkien mythological history of Middle Earth. So it's kind of talking about the story before Lord of the Rings. It details the creation of the world by Eru Ilúvatar. Does that sound how you spell it? Sound it?
I don't know. I would have looked that up beforehand.
He is the god and the angelical beings known as the Valar, followed by the epic and often tragic conflict between the Dark Lord Morgoth and the elves, which revolves around the theft of the three holy jewels called the Silmarils, hence the name. The book is divided into 5 parts, exploring the creation, the war for the Silmarils, the history of men, and the downfall of the ancient kingdom of Numenor. So there's a lot in just this one book, and that's a very small, brief summary.
I have Eru Ilúvatar. Eru Ilúvatar.
Okay, that's the name of the god. And we're going to be working on pronunciations and just breaking down characters because there are so many in this book. So we decided to start at the preface and the foreword, and Ethan in a little bit is going to get a little bit further into it. But I was just going to do a quick summary of what we read this week. So we're going to read part of a chapter or a whole chapter each episode and then break it down. So this episode, we read the preface and the foreword. Christopher Tolkien is J.R.R. Tolkien's son, and he's actually the one who put the Silmarillion together. He found his dad's notes and his different writings, and he compiled it. So this came out after J.R.R. Tolkien passed away. So the foreword is Christopher Tolkien, the editor, just explaining why he wrote the book, why it's kind of in an unfinished nature, because like I said, Tolkien actually never finished it. And also just talking about his editorial process, and then he talked about the Elder Days as well. So in the newer books of the Silmarillion, so actually it's not in this older hardback book, but there is a letter that's also included. So if you have a new book of the Silmarillion, Christopher Tolkien includes a letter that his dad wrote to Milton Waldman, which was his publisher in 1951, and Tolkien wanted to try to convince his publisher to publish the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings at the same time. And so this whole letter just kind of goes into Tolkien's reasoning for writing the mythology of Middle Earth. So it's pretty interesting, and we'll get into it a little bit further. So it just provides insight into Tolkien's creative intentions and his vision for his mythology. So that's a brief overview of what we're going to talk about today, and Ethan gets the harder part of actually diving in deeper to the preface and the forward, and just a little bit more. We're going to learn a little bit more about who Tolkien was. So over to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. So wanted to start out by just as we're going through, we've been into Lord of the Rings for a while. We recently got to do a trip to New Zealand. Got really excited about a lot of things there. That was really cool. But we've heard of so many things. People are like, I started Silmarillion and I can't finish it. It's just so complicated. So basically, we're going into it. Haven't read it before. I've seen like an overview online of kind of a little bit about what it's about, but even that was quite confusing, even the summary. So as we get into it, it had me questioning a little bit more. Like, okay, let me figure out a little bit more about who J.R.R. Tolkien is, get a little bit of his biography, and maybe give insight as we're reading to some things that might be pretty interesting. Maybe we'll make some connections there, and feel free to correct us if you don't think those are correct connections. But we're just getting into this. So I wanted to start. That had me interested in a little bit of the biography of J.R.R. Tolkien. So John Ronald Reuel Tolkien was born in 1892. His parents were British, but he was born in South Africa, and I think his father had moved there for work, and so he moved there. I guess he was born there, but unfortunately, 4 years after he was born, he was 4 years old. His father passed away, so his mother moved back to England at that point. So he moved back to England. I think it was around 1896. And then in about 1900, his mother converted to Roman Catholicism, and that becomes a very, very big part of J.R.R. Tolkien's life and his writings. There is his Christianity, and so really unfortunately, when he was 12 years old, so 8 years after his dad passed away, his mother passed away as well, and so he has one sibling, a younger brother. And that left him and his brother in the care of it. It seems like the Catholic Church. There was a ward of the Catholic Church, from what I could see, and it seems like a kind of an orphanage situation or whatnot there. So early on, you can see Tolkien has a lot of loss in his life, more than probably the average one of us definitely has to deal with. So although born in South Africa, he moved into England when he was 4, and he takes on really that English identity, which was his parents throughout the rest of his writing and whatnot. So he ends up studying at Oxford University. He studies the English language and literature, and he also develops or he continues to develop a passion he has for different languages, ancient languages, etc. So his education got disrupted by World War One. And so he did serve in the war there. Saw some pretty gruesome battles. It appears, and it appears he suffered the loss of a lot of friends as well during that time. So you could just see he already, pretty young, still has a lot of loss in life. So he ends up getting married. I believe that actually happened before World War One. He got married to his wife Edith. They actually met as teenagers in the orphanage situation there, and they were not allowed to be together, or he was not, or it was frowned upon, or something of that nature. So essentially, they don't start dating, I believe, until he's 21, even though they had kind of had a crush on each other, or at least he had a crush on her for quite a while. And it's very interesting because that's kind of like he has a forbidden love for her for a bit, and that's actually one of the characters, Luthien, that we learn about in Silmarillion, is based off his wife, and there's a relationship there that's based on some, in the very least, frowned upon love. We'll read more and we'll report back on exactly what's going on there. But I found that, so it's just some of his inspirations you can see already for the Silmarillion and for kind of the greater Lord of the Rings universe. Once he returned from World War One, he became a professor at Oxford of English literature there, and so he was professor for quite a while. He actually joined what I found interesting. He joined a literary group called the Inklings, and that's where he met C.S. Lewis. And the Inklings was a pun on people who dabble in writing and people who have an inkling of an idea of what they want to talk about. So he's kind of making fun of themselves too, because people have these half-baked ideas of these maybe fantasy universes or whatnot. And so the Inklings was that group with like-minded individuals who talk about that. So that's where he developed his friendship with C.S. Lewis. So early on, it's in life, he was very into languages, as I mentioned. He created several languages, and it seems like a lot of that. I don't know. I was just have conjecture, but if you're kind of lost both of your parents and you're stuck in an orphanage early on, you could um, kind of get away from it all in fantasy universes. And I don't exactly know if that's what his inspiration was, but he had time to create. He was very interested in those languages and different ways to talk and whatnot. I don't know if he was a socially awkward kid at all.
Ask that.
I don't know that, but there seems like some signs that he very well might have been. I do not know though. So anyway, he had him and his wife have 4 kids. They end up being some of the audience he writes when he's writing The Hobbit and fleshing things out. They end up being some of his discussion group as he's going through the story.
Kids?
His kids do,
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
yeah. So he kind of wrote it for them, and I think he revised things based on what they said and things of that nature. It appears as well. So anyway, so Hobbit. J.R.R. Tolkien died in 1973, so 1892 to 1973. The Hobbit was published in 1937. And then Lord of the Rings was published in 3 volumes between 1954 and 1955, and then that did very well, and that really is when his career took off.
So then he finished it published in 1950. The last one was in 1955.
Correct. Yeah.
And then when did he pass away?
He passed away in 1973.
Okay, so he was like alive for like 20 years of the.
Yeah, so
the
he got to
fame
enjoy
of
some of
Lord
that success or fame, if you will. It appears, and then the Silmarillion was published in 1977, as Addie I believe mentioned, by his son Christopher Tolkien. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Christopher Tolkien. I don't want to take a whole lot of time there, but because he does end up writing, he does compile the Silmarillion, and then he does write the foreword, I think here. And
Yeah.
he puts together the letter to the editor, which is the preface, essentially. So he was born in 1924 in England. He also went to Oxford to a subsidiary, Trinity College, which is a subsidiary of Oxford College. I don't exactly know how that works, but he became a lecturer in Old and Middle English at the University of Oxford. So also interested in language, it appears, like his father was.
Wait, I forgot already. Where did Tolkien go to college?
He ended up going to Oxford as well.
So they both
yes,
went to
they
Oxford.
did.
Okay.
He went to Exeter College, part of Oxford University, and then Christopher went to Trinity College, part of Oxford University. And I don't quite know how that education system works. So they're under the Oxford umbrella. I'm not quite
Maybe
sure.
in different cities or something. We should look that up.
Different campuses? I don't know. But this is not an Oxford University podcast. So one thing to note, though, he also joined the Inklings. Yes,
cute.
so he was in his father's group. I guess there probably was some overlap when him and his father were both in the group at the same time, I assume. I don't know that for sure, but it seems like timeline that could add up as well. So on close to C.S. Lewis, close to J.R.R. Tolkien's death, he actually worked with Christopher and made him his what's called a literary executor for his works. So there was some planning before J.R.R. Tolkien died. Christopher already had an interest in his works and was really respected his father and wanted to see these things continue on through. So anyway, so he starts compiling. So I think he has some direction on where J.R.R. has been, his father, but then he gets to compile a lot of things as well through that. So it seems like the Silmarillion is kind of his. He starts. It kind of shows his brain, and so he starts in one place where he's like, I kind of have an idea for a fantasy universe. Then he goes off, writes Lord of the Rings, but as he's writing Lord of the Rings, he's like, now how does that play into my backstory of creating the Silmarillion? And then he'd be like, you know what, I think it sounds better based on this new story I'm writing if we go back in. And then he would go change and edit the Silmarillion. And he's like, you know what, I'm going to add this new character to Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, so I need to create a backstory for them and see if it weaves together in what I currently have in the Silmarillion. So the Silmarillion was...
I was just going to ask. So it feels like it was kind of written like up here, and Hobbit and Lord of the Rings was down here. And
yeah, it's like he kind of started with it, and then kind of like would go off onto specific characters in it. And then go back and kind of change some of the backstory or get his influence from his backstory to the works he was creating. And so it was constantly edited and whatnot, and which is one of the reasons it didn't get published until after he died, when he could no longer be alive to edit anything else. No more content.
It had to be done.
So what was there is what we got. So Christopher Tolkien, he put all that together and gave us a Silmarillion. One of the things he had mentioned was his father. So due to the writing style in Silmarillion, it was his father would some things he would go into a lot of depth as he was like really hashing out the ideas, and there's some things he did not go into a lot of depth on. And so some of the Silmarillion, you might see that it's like some of these stories, they seem to go into a lot of depth, and some of the stories or characters in there, you're like, I really think there should be more on this character, but Tolkien, for whatever reason, did not elaborate more on that character, or maybe intended to go back and. But so you're going to find how the stories weave together. Some of it seems very long and continuous, and you might have some interjection points or things where it's like, I wish I had known more about that. Things. So we'll have to look for that as we go through, and on that and see there. So one of the other contributions from Christopher Tolkien is that he also drew. It says original maps was my research, so I don't know if Tolkien had sketched some things out, or he'd worked with Christopher when they were both alive to draw the maps. But apparently a lot of the maps you see, which I find very, very helpful, are from Christopher Tolkien. So there's a big contribution on his part there.
Yeah, that's cool. I think we'll probably put some up while we do some of these episodes so that you guys can follow along on the maps too.
Yes.
If you're watching it on video.
And then, so as Addie mentioned, the Foreword was published in 1977 with the Silmarillion by Tolkien, and then the preface was in 1999, added to the second edition of the Silmarillion, and that is basically a letter to the editor that Addie mentioned. Of this is J.R.R. Tolkien trying to convince the editor to publish. I believe he wanted to publish the Silmarillion and Lord of the Rings at the same time, which would have been very different if this was published in 1973 and the Lord of the Rings was in 1955. I don't know if there was 18 more years of additional content from there, but considering the fact he was always editing things and whatnot, I wonder how much would have changed in the Silmarillion.
Yeah, it would have forced him to finish it in 1950. When did the first one come out? 1951 or 52? So it might have helped him finish it. But I don't know. It would be interesting to know how much more content he added in those 20
I do wonder if after the fact he was like relieved that he actually had an open source, if you will, that he could go and edit and whatnot for. So he's like, you know what? I'm glad I didn't close off this universe so early.
Yeah, he could keep changing it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But basically, it was rejected. Obviously, that the publisher did not want to publish them both at the same time. There was a couple reasons for that, but I think basically he did not like some of the. I think Tolkien needed to elaborate a little bit farther in terms of some things on the work, and then I think the publisher also just didn't think some of it related as well to the characters or to modern day. Didn't think it was going to do as well in the sales, essentially. So they made a compromise where Tolkien essentially, if you look in the Lord of the Rings books, there are very extensive appendices, I think. Okay, a lot of appendix. And so I think he took a lot of his things that his ideas from Silmarillion, and he published them in the forms of the appendices there in Lord of the Rings. So that was kind of what the compromise they made with the publishing house and J.R.R. Tolkien. So anyway, that's kind of a little bit about the preface of the book. Another thing, so the preface is kind of a whole summary of the Silmarillion. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to go through all that because we want to go through chapter by chapter and go into details. But it does.
We didn't want to give anything away.
And some of it we just didn't understand through the summary. So anyway, but we want to go through a little bit more as well. So basically, Tolkien goes through as well in his letter, and he talks about kind of the why behind his creation of the Lord of the Rings universe, Middle Earth, etc. And so, early age, once again, he loved fairy tales, myths. He can never get enough of them. Don't know if that was because he wanted to escape the real world as a kid, a lot of pain and whatnot. But as he kind of grew older, he he still loved myths, but he realized the English did not have a good set lore, and so he wanted to give enough depth.
Like England, the country,
England,
right?
yeah,
Okay.
England did not to give enough depth to rival some of the Greek mythology, and some other things as well. I think Beowulf as well. Um, and so Arthur was one of the things he mentioned was somewhat of a lore, but he's like it was more based on he felt like a previous culture more tied to the land as opposed to modern day England. He didn't feel like the characters could relate as well to it, I don't know. He considered it incomplete. So he's like,
Yeah, he thought it was too allegorical. Is that what he said?
he does
Yeah,
say
he
that.
doesn't like how it's too, yeah, too easy to understand what they were trying to get you to
Yeah,
understand.
and so that kind of goes into actually great to my next point, Addie, where he talks about like what he writes about and kind of some of his philosophy behind writing. So he doesn't uh, um, he doesn't believe that fantasy it should reflect moral and religious truth, but not directly have it. And I believe Arthur directly talks about Christianity and things of that nature. However, in Lord of the Rings, you can find a lot of he's a devout Roman Catholic. J.R.R. Tolkien was. You can see a lot of religious themes in there. However, you never have like Aragorn takes communion. There's no baptism. There's
No
no
praying.
yeah, exactly. So there's no um, so it doesn't directly bring this world into the fantasy world. It just more alludes to that. So that's one of the things that J.R.R. Tolkien was big about. He doesn't really like so he doesn't like allegory. He's like, but there's really no way to relate to an audience without some theme. So here's the themes he did say. He's like, once again, I don't like allegory, but I have to have some themes, or else it just doesn't make sense to a human mind. Is how what I understood it. So he talks about
Does Tolkien not have a human mind?
No, he does, but he needs to sell things. He needs people to be interested in his work. um, so the fall, mortality, and what he calls the machine. So those are three themes he calls. He's like, I really don't want these to be allegorical. I don't want you to be able to relate them to modern day things. But sometimes there's just no way around a few of these things. But he wanted it to really be kind of a standalone fantasy universe and not be like, hey, I'm trying to make a political point here or a religious point here. That wasn't going to be the main theme of it. So he's like, there's no real way, and I'm going to ask you guys a question about this at the end, if you agree with these themes or if you have additional ones or whatnot. But he's like, there's no great way to have a fantasy world without some sort of fall. So he's like, there's a fall, and that's definitely a religious theme. It's the fall of man into sin. And just how things are not perfect in general. So he's like,
So that's the first one, the fall.
the
right?
fall, and so basically, the Silmarillion talks about a lot of the fall of the elves and a few, if I understand correctly, essentially angels that become the Dark Lord at one
some of the
point.
Valar.
Yes, yeah. As we'll get more into that. So he's like, you have to have a fall to have a fantasy story. As well. So Fall of the Elves is going to be part of that as well. That theme. So that's one theme. Is like I don't see how to get away from that. So I wouldn't call it allegory, but that's gonna definitely still going to be a theme. So mortality is another theme. I think he's just like if no one ever dies, it's really hard to have a good fantasy story. If it's hard to relate to as humans, where we all die. So
And just you were talking about all the loss that he experienced in his life. I think it relates to his life too.
Absolutely, yeah, and yeah, he couldn't escape that people, whatever fantasy world he did, people around him still died, his friends, family, and a lot of loss. So then mortality is part of there, and that he kind of contrasts, like you have the elves who are in a sense are immortal, and then mankind who is mortal. So he plays with mortality with those two races there. And then there's another theme he calls the machine, and I've seen a few different explanations of what he means by that. It seems though he means someone who is who wants to dominate and overcome other people, and so he was He said technology can do it. I believe he said science can do it. He uses magic as a form to say someone who wants to take a really strong power and get a lot of control. So that type of theme was in there as well. Um, he's like, and I'm trying to think of fantasy in general. Like you have to have, in general, I think you would have a lot of times you do have that force of evil, if you will, um, and that's
Is it
trying to
always
control.
evil? Do
Um,
you know?
I don't know. I don't know. I think though he definitely used Sauron and Saruman to
Hmm.
portray that in Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
and we'll find out what he uses in uh,
Silmarillion.
the Silmarillion. So anyway, that as Addie mentioned, the rest of the preface just talks about the rest of the book. So those are the three themes that he said are going to be in the book. And then he also mentioned a little bit like how apparently these Silmarils are lost. And there are three gems that were created by an elven smith. So very beautiful and powerful gems. The elves would use to stop decay, um, and these are lost. So that's the summary I have of the preface. Do you have questions, thoughts, anything you want to add?
Yeah, when reading it, I felt like those three things, the fall, what was the second one?
Mortality.
Mortality and machine were kind of confusing. So thanks for breaking those down. I feel like it makes a little bit more sense.
I had to look at a few different opinions on it to try to find those, because especially the machine, there was like a few people that had some ideas that I don't know. Some of it was clear, so it was not clear.
Yeah, the machine was the most vague in terms of the letter that he wrote when we were reading the preface. So, but I think I get it. But no, thanks. That was good.
Okay, well, that's all I have. I do have a question for the audience, if I can go ahead and ask that now or not. But
Yep.
this is just something I wanted to think about, and you can leave that in the comments, or wanted to think, and I talked about this before, the themes that were addressed, fall, mortality, and this the machine, this overpowering will to dominate others. Uh, do you feel like those themes are necessary for good fantasy? Is there some good examples? Just like I don't really see that in these type of fantasy novels, or you're like or there's something you think is important to add to that as well. So that's everything. Everything I have by going through the forward and the preface for the Silmarillion.
Thanks. I thought it would be fun for me to bring some questions to Ethan that he doesn't know what they are. My thought was further on in the episodes to be some like questions of what actually happened in the story. Maybe something I didn't quite get or something. But since this is the preface and the forward, it's a little bit deeper. It's not really like just about the story. So the question is, and I can answer it too if you want me to. What intimidates you or excites you about diving into the dense mythology of the Silmarillion now that you've read the preface and the foreword and know a little bit more of why J.R.R. Tolkien wrote this?
So I've always been intimidated because everyone says it's intimidating. They just say it's very complicated. The overview I saw seemed pretty complicated and confusing, um, and also a lot of the names are hard to pronounce. I feel like I'm going to have to take extra time to pronounce the names and know like which names belong to which race, and to remember who that person is. So that's somewhat intimidating as well.
We might have to get a spreadsheet.
Might have to do the spreadsheet, yeah. And then what excites me though is to try to go through and um, conquer that intimidation, if you will. Be able to learn more about J.R.R. Tolkien, and kind of expand on what we know about the Lord of the Rings universe. And I think there's chapters in Lord of the Rings that I don't quite understand because they will refer to things in the Silmarillion, or at least lineage and things of that nature. And a new TV shows coming out, things like that. It's like it would be nice to know some of that. So I'm excited to get deeper into that.
Yeah. Should I answer it too?
Yeah, I think you should. What about you?
I'm excited because it's just fun to extend the Lord of the Rings mythology and learn more. It's kind of probably shouldn't get into this too much with Lord of the Rings fans, but it's kind of like why we liked the Rings of Power, because it was just more content, Lord of the Rings content. So that's what I'm excited about, just learning more. I'm very intimidated. I'm actually really glad we're doing this podcast together, because I think that it will really help me. Sometimes I just can't read something one time and remember it. So if we're going back through it, and then Ethan has a really good memory, so he can keep reminding me of the names and the characters. So yeah, I'm excited to do this together. But I guess that would be what would intimidate me too. It's just a very dense book. We just need to take it really slowly.
Well, and I think too we'll be able to maybe we won't like Rings of Power as much after we do this, because
Yeah, we
people
might
will get
learn a
when people
lot.
say like, oh no, that none of this stuff was supposed to none of this stuff is supposed to happen and whatnot. Whereas right now we have a little bit more of an ignorance is bliss. Hey, it's really cool to see these elven and dwarvish realms and these things
Yeah.
as well. So might learn more from that too.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is all we had for you guys today. If you wanted to um, reach out and ask any questions, or correct us on anything, you can just email us at a couple of Silmarils at gmail.com, or in any of the comments of where we post this. Yeah, we hope to be just putting out episodes. We're not sure if we'll do chapter by chapter, or we might break the chapters up. But we're excited to go through the book with you and together. And yeah, that's all I had.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Until next time, a couple of Silmarils out.